Hey, it's Carrie from Lovely Etc. And today I want to help simplify one of the hardest parts of painting furniture, and that is applying sealer to help protect your furniture with a perfectly smooth, streak-free finish. And no, you don't have to use a paint sprayer. So I know when I first started painting furniture, I used to dread the part where I needed to seal my paint, because so many times that's when things just went horribly wrong, and it felt like I was just ruining this beautiful furniture I had just painted. It would either get streaky, or I had painted something dark and suddenly it had a white film over it, or I painted something white and it started looking yellow, or it just generally did not look good. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I was doing wrong and how to fix it. And now I truly believe you really don't have to be afraid to seal your furniture. If you learn how to do it correctly and you follow that process every time, 99% of the time, you're gonna get amazing results. Now, is it possible that something goes wrong sometime? Absolutely. But if you follow this process, the majority of the time, you're not gonna have to worry about ruining your nice painted furniture. Okay, so really quick, why are we even sealing furniture? If it's something that's causing all this dread in people, why don't we just skip it? Well, the truth is that a lot of paints are not hard enough and durable enough on their own to stand up to the use and abuse that we put our furniture through. Especially chalk paints, milk paints. Most paints are not going to handle any kind of everyday regular use without a sealer. There are some paints, some all-in-one paints, that you don't have to apply a separate sealer to. And most of the time that's fine, but even with those paints, if you are putting them on something that's going to get a lot of use, like a tabletop or cabinets or just the dresser that you're opening constantly, you still should really use a sealer. And the reason is it's going to make your paint finish last so much longer. Most people now are going for a really smooth, perfect finish, which means every flaw is really going to stand out. And if you don't use a sealer, there will be flaws. So using a sealer means that your paint finish is just going to last many years longer than if you don't, the vast majority of the time. So even though it's a little bit tricky figuring out how to do it, it's absolutely worth it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is really set yourself up for success by using a great sealer and choosing the right thing to apply it with. So today I am using Varathane Water-Based Polyurethane in a matte finish. It's a great budget-friendly sealer, and I also love that you can just go grab it at your local hardware store. You don't have to order online, pay for shipping, any of that. I have done a lot of research into the best sealers because, like I said, I really wanted to solve this problem. So I have a list over at my website, lovelyetc.com, that goes into detail about all the sealers I've tested and which ones I recommend, but I'll also put a quick list in the video description of the sealers that I think are worth giving a try. Okay, so once you pick your sealer, you also need to figure out how you're going to apply it. So first of all, most sealers can be applied with a paint sprayer, and yes, that will give you a beautiful, super smooth finish. But for everybody that doesn't have a paint sprayer or doesn't want to deal with getting out their paint sprayer or doesn't have anywhere to use it, there are other options that can also give you really good results. You can use a high quality paintbrush. You do not want to be using a chip brush or a brush from the dollar store. You want a nice paintbrush with really smooth bristles. A lot of Purdy brushes are really good for this. Really any high quality brush that feels smooth. You can also use a clean rag. This used to be my preferred method. I would just use scraps from old t-shirts. They were lint-free, they were soft, and you just rub it right on with your rag and it works well. But now my preferred method is using one of these blue sponges. You can order these online. They're a couple bucks each and they work great. I've actually had this one little blue sponge for about 2 years now, reusing it, and then finally I just went and ordered some in bulk because I thought this was a little bit ridiculous, but it's still going strong. I like the sponge because you're not going to get brush strokes. There are no bristles to even leave brush strokes, so it already is primed to give you a really smooth finish. And it's also really easy to use. It's easy to control how much sealer you're putting on, and easy to hold. Just all the things work well. It's cheap, so this is my preferred method now. Before you get started, you want to make sure that you stir your sealer really well. Do not shake it up. I love mixing my paints by just shaking them really crazy, but with a sealer that just leads to air bubbles, which leads to not a very smooth finish. So don't do that. Make sure that you stir it well. And also, if you're working in a garage or a basement or outside, which a lot of the time we are, I'm in my garage right now, you want to make sure that you are in a place that is not too hot, not too cold, and not too crazy humid, because all of those things can wreak havoc with your sealer, and then even if you do everything right, it's just not going to go well. So there will be a specific temperature range on your sealer can that tells you what temperatures will work. And usually it's somewhere in the range of like 50 to 80 is good. Just make sure you're applying it in the right conditions. Again, set yourself up for success. So once you start sealing your furniture, you want to get a little bit of sealer on your sponge. Pick an area of your furniture to start. And if you're not feeling super confident, why not just pick an area that's not going to be super visible, so like a side, so that you can just kind of get your feet under you as you're going. And you want to make sure as you're applying the sealer that you are applying really thin coats. This is honestly the most important thing you can do. And I think this is the biggest step where people really mess up a little bit and don't realize. I know that this was a huge problem for me in the past. So you want to use really thin coats of sealer. And yes, that does mean you'll probably need to use more coats, but that's okay, because it's better to spend more time, maybe an hour more, doing more thin coats of sealer and have it look just beautiful than to try to rush through, do 2 thicker coats so you can move on and it doesn't look good, because the whole point is to make it look good. So if it doesn't look good, the whole thing was a waste. So don't rush. In general, I try to do 3 to 4 really thin coats of sealer. And that does mean each coat you apply, you're going to have to then wait for it to dry completely before you apply the next coat. Okay, so I'm saying do very thin coats. What exactly does that mean? I want to get specific because I feel like sometimes people say things and don't define it, and then beginners don't know what to do. So when I say you need to use thin coats, I mean you want to get the sealer onto your sponge or your brush and then wipe some of it off so that it drips off and there's only a thin coating on your brush or your sponge. When you start applying it, you'll easily be able to see if you have too little or too much. If there's sealer bubbling up all over or dripping or just looking thick, then that's too much. You need to wipe more off. If, as you're trying to apply your sealer, it's dragging and it's not evenly coating the furniture, you can see bare spots, then you don't have enough, so get a little bit more. Most sealers are gonna go on white and then finish clear. But as you're applying your sealer, you wanna keep an eye out for any particularly white streaky looking patches or bubbles or drips, and take care of those right away. Just use your sponge, or you can also use a second clean sponge. Wipe away bubbles, drips, areas where it got really too thick immediately before you even move on to the next section. Once you've finished applying your first coat, walk away. Don't touch anything else up. That is the second biggest reason that applying sealer goes terribly wrong. Once your sealer's halfway dry, it is far too late to try to fix any errors or touch anything up. And instead, you're just gonna end up leaving smudges and fingerprints and imperfections all over your finish. You never wanna touch sealer that's only half dry, and same thing for paint. You don't wanna be touching up paint when it's halfway dry. You need to do it immediately when you first apply it, or you need to wait until it is completely dry. I know it is incredibly tempting as soon as you finish to step back and say, oh, wait, there's a bubble. Oh, I missed a spot. It's too late. Walk away. When you come back to do your second coat, if you see imperfections and there's drips or spots that are not even, take some high grit sandpaper. 320 is great. 220 is probably fine too. Gently sand it out, and then wipe off all the dust and apply your second coat. A lot of those imperfections you see though when you first finish applying your sealer are gonna work themselves out anyway. All sealers are self-leveling, so a lot of the bubbles are gonna go away, and most of the time it's gonna be fine. And if it's not, still walk away, don't make it worse. You can sand between coats of sealer, and some sealers have that as one of the instructions. Honestly, I don't. I feel like that's just asking for trouble, and it's not really needed. The sealer is still gonna adhere fine and look good. Now, if you prefer to do that, go right ahead. Okay, and that brings us to my third secret for really getting a perfect finish when you're sealing painted furniture. Sometimes, even if you follow all the best steps and you do everything right, you still don't get the results you want, and it is incredibly frustrating. I have painted many, many pieces of furniture, and there are still times when inexplicably things just don't seem to be going my way, particularly when it's time to seal furniture. but I found a trick that really helps. And in particular, I found that this really helps when you're using the cheaper paint sealers that can be a little bit more tricky to work with, including the Varathane sealer that I'm using on this piece, and also Minwax Polycrylic. Both of those are great sealers because they're a lot cheaper and you can just head out to your local home improvement store and buy them. You don't have to worry about shipping or anything like that. But I've also found they're both a bit trickier to use. So if you're having a hard time getting that beautiful finish as you're sealing your furniture, and no matter how hard you try and how much you work to do everything just perfectly, it still looks a bit streaky. Here's what I found that really helps. Mix just a little bit of your furniture paint directly into your sealer. Stir them up really well. You want to aim for about 10% paint to 90% sealer. So, I mean, you don't have to like measure everything. That's just a general guide. You're gonna mix them together. I would put them in a paint pan or a separate container so you're not tainting your entire can of sealer. Mix them together really well and then apply the sealer. You won't be able to tell that you've added paint because it's gonna perfectly match the color that's already on your furniture. And it just helps everything blend together better. It helps prevent any yellowing that you're seeing on white furniture. It helps prevent any grayish tint you're seeing on really dark furniture. It can just help you get those last few steps to that perfect finish you're looking for when it's feeling like a major struggle. In fact, I ended up using that trick on the secretary behind me because even though I was following all the best practices, it still just wasn't quite as flawless as I wanted. And when I mixed in a little paint, just everything seemed much easier. So I highly recommend that trick anytime you're struggling. And one final bonus tip, once you have finished sealing your furniture, be gentle with it. It actually takes most furniture sealers up to 30 days to fully cure or harden. So during those first few days and even first few weeks, your furniture is going to be really vulnerable to being scratched or chipped, and it's just going to not have the durability that it will have eventually. So at the beginning, be extra gentle. If you can give yourself a little bit of a buffer of a few days or even a couple of weeks before you actually start using the furniture, or if you're a seller, before you try to sell the furniture, you're gonna get a lot better results and it's just gonna stay looking beautiful much more easily. Once you get past those first few weeks, the finish is gonna be so much more durable and hold up really well and be ready for you to use it as normal. Hopefully those tips will help you get a really beautiful, really durable finish next time you paint furniture, and maybe even keep you from wanting to pull your hair out a little bit. And if you love a good furniture flip, I suggest you head over and check out this cute little green secretary's transformation next. It really went through quite the transformation, and I think you're going to be very surprised when you see how it started out and the full reveal of how it looks now.